which is the first generation of 747s. SP stood for Special Performance. The airlines contacted Boeing and said, can you build a plane that can go from nonstop from New York City to Tehran? And they said, yeah, we can do that. So the main difference between this and the standard 747 of those generations is that it's 45 feet shorter than the standard 747, had different wing on it and more powerful engines to do that. Only 45 of these were built for those airlines, and also a lot of people that happen to live in the Middle East, and they thought that they needed a plane this size to take their 28 family members on vacation. You needed a lot of money to buy one of these and operate them. This first flew by Pan Am for Pan Am for a while, and then by United, and in 1997 NASA bought this plane. This was Sofia, the scientific observatory for infrared astronomy, and we'll talk about that in a second. A joint program between NASA and the German National Space Agency, so you'll see the letters DLR on the side. So the German agency designed and built the telescope that was in this plane, and NASA worked with them to develop this aircraft to carry it. When this retired in 2022, we were very fortunate, before you leave I'll tell you how we got it, to get this aircraft. When it came here, the telescope was still intact, and the German Space Agency came over and removed it, packed it up, and took it back to Germany with them. Personally, because the plane was flight worthy at that point in time, I thought it would have made more sense to just fly it over to Germany, let them take it out in their own backyard and come back, but volunteer, nobody listens to me. All right. And I may suggest to you, as you're walking around today, that you go to the Space Gallery, which is Building 7, because inside there we have another exhibit surrounding Sofia, and we have a cutaway model of a plane that will show you in detail some of the things I'm going to explain that made this such a special aircraft. And also on a loop, the Smithsonian Channel runs a program called Great Plains, and in about 2014 they did an hour-long program about this mission. That's when it began to begin. Okay, so what's infrared astronomy? Infrared, as we know, is a color that we cannot see with our eye. We can begin to get on the infrared scale if we're sitting out by a campfire, because we see yellow, green, orange. Those are the beginning of the infrared spectrum, and that's what they wanted to chase as they were going. This telescope, which is behind this bulkhead, this was a big counterweight for it. The telescope weighed 19 tons, a huge piece of equipment. About 9 feet in diameter. They had to keep the condensation off of there. So when you look at, if you look at any flight tracking software, if you got your cousin coming in from Boston or something, usually it's a gentle arc from point A to point B, except around the airfields. I was very fortunate when I first began doing these tours. A young lady was telling us that she was a graduate student at the U of A here in astronomy. She's now an astronomer at Kitt Peak. She got to make a flight on Sofia. And Sofia flew at night out of Palmdale, California, and they called it the vampire flight because it only flew at night. Each mission was about 10 hours in length, and she told us that the air traffic controller said, we used to love it when you guys were in the air, because instead of that arc, it was like you gave a 4-year-old an Etch-a-Sketch, because it was going like this all the time. They had to make very precise, numerous precise adjustments, 1 or 2 degrees at a time. So at this blue station back here, that's where the 2 mission controllers sat. They was responsible for them. Their responsibility was to communicate with the flight crew in the upper deck and tell them which course they had to take to keep that telescope on target. Very, very important. Now, a couple times the turbulence got so great that they had to scrub the mission because they just could not get to where they wanted to. Also, if they restricted airspace, military bases in foreign countries like that, they couldn't actually get close to some and couldn't get everything that they wanted. But the main advantage was this could go anywhere in the world to get some astronomical events dealing with infrared light that land-based telescopes would not get. This time of the year, it flew out of Palmdale, California. In our winter season, it went down, was based out of Christchurch, New Zealand, to get the summer hemisphere like that. So all this used to be, these are just remnants of some of the equipment that the monitors and the sensors that help control the movement of the telescope, also the computer banks that gathered the data that the scientists were chasing. Here, as I said, the mission controllers sat in this space right here. Why don't you come down this way a little bit? As you look at these cards here, these are actual photos from some of the missions that they ran. And if it has a QR code, they are live, that if something catches your eye, you can learn a little bit more about that. Just like a regular flight, the passengers had to buckle in for takeoff and landing and seats like that. This console here was usually used by educators. We got this plane in the fall of 2022, and shortly after it landed, I went back by the fence to see it. And there was a woman there in her mid-50s, and she just had tears coming down her eyes. And I asked her if she was okay, and she began to tell me she had been a teacher in Chicago, and she made a flight on Sofia, and excuse me, a broadcast back to her class. And she said, highlight of my teaching career. She goes, I feel like I'm seeing an old friend. So it's always nice for us at the museum to hear from people who can interact with the aircraft as we see it. So it flew from 2014 to 2022, and people always ask, why did they stop the mission? Well, at one point in time, they determined they could probably gathered all the information that they could get from a flying platform like this, and that was all driven by cost. A very, very expensive program to maintain. My 8 minutes are up. I got to stop. So they decided to retire the program at that point in time. At the end of the day, this was just a 747 a little bit. That's an original galley that came out of the factory in the 1970s. Some seats up there were again the crew sat. The flight deck was up above, and we were very fortunate to get this plane. NASA had offered it to a couple museums who said no, we didn't want it. And then I don't know why we were so far down on the pecking order. Excuse me, but when they came to us, our curator says, yes, we can use it. And the story is told that literally within an hour or so, as this was leaving Palmdale, California, the museum contacted NASA, the museum that had turned it down 2 or 3 weeks prior, and said, you know, we thought about it, we could really use that plane. They said, too late, it's on its way to Tucson. So we're very, very happy to have this plane here. Any questions I can possibly answer? People, if you were in Hangar 1 with the SR-71 Blackbird, the fastest plane ever to fly, one of the reasons that they grounded that program was they were relying more on satellites. But again, it's a lot easier to get from point A to point B when you're traveling at 2,300 miles an hour as opposed to a satellite. But the SR-71 was also a victim of cost as well. Yeah, but satellite technology is what they're relying on now.
Point. Which is like, let me get everything outside. The oh yeah. I didn't like that all that much, but like I love DAX systems. You know. Shouldn't nerd about it. Well, I don't know where it's at. I don't want EE. Like I love system. Yeah.
Yeah, during the summer months, they really keep us on a tight schedule. Like I said, oh yeah. Somebody, we just had a guy that was in L3, and he was talking about the cameras they put in. He worked on these cameras.
Oh, okay.
He was just on the last tour.
Okay. Yeah.
For the rest of the museum, what did they say?
Thank you.
Okay.
That's so cool.
Periodic table. Hey, Zach.
Hi.
Bearing for the wind
Yeah, they did. I have to get more information on that. That's not in our standard tour, but I get that question a lot. And I have to find out how they manage it.
That's quite a feat.
So there's the big door that they would open up. Only 2% decrease in fuel efficiency when they opened it up, and then the telescope would look out that door, and the people inside the plane, well, you heard it, would hardly notice.